Hey everybody, I'm Charlie Moses here with the mochamoguls.com. I'm here with our personal finance expert, Dr. John Beckem. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Noma. How you doing?
Very good. So a golf day for you, but you took some time out at my request to come and share, or as they say nowadays, drop some knowledge, right?
Yeah. So if you could tell by my attire that I'm actually supposed to be on the golf course right now, but
Right.
you gave me a call, and I always take your calls.
Oh, thank you. I feel privileged. Um, I have a really, really good, or rather, we have a really good segment today. I asked a question because we were doing another segment, and the question was really about you predicting that 2018 is going to probably be the year that it all comes tumbling down in terms of the financial world. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, there's different levels. So I don't know in 2018 if it's all going to tumble down to the ground, but I do see a restriction that's going to happen in the market, right? So, if I look at last week, the market, the Dow, for the first time hit 23,000, and it's kind of sustaining. It's grown higher than 23,000. And so you see the market, equities, I'm talking about stocks now, they're increasing. Another thing that I see is in regards to real estate. I see a lot of people who are purchasing homes and purchasing investments. So investments are the commercial space, the apartments, things for investment. And what the sellers are selling these properties for and what the buyers are buying, they do not cash flow. In other words, if you look at your income coming in from, let's say, an apartment building. So let's say 200 units apartment building. Mm-hmm. So if I look at the income coming in, and then I subtract all of my expenses and operation costs, taxes, insurance, utilities, and so forth. There should be a result. So income minus expenses gives me my net operating income, right? And then if you have any debt, as far as a mortgage on a property, you take that away, and then you have what's called cash flow. Mm-hmm. And if that means after I pay all my bills and responsibilities, if I have some money that's left over coming back to me, then that's positive cash flow. If I have to dig out of my own pocket to put money into this property, that's negative cash flow, right? And what determines that cash flow is the income is the income, but what did I purchase the property for? So if I purchase the property correctly, then I should have a positive cash flow. If I pay too much for the property, then 9 times out of 10, I'm going to have a negative cash flow. And that's keeping things constant. It means you pay a normal interest rate, whatever the interest rate right now is, somewhere between 4 and 5%. And you're putting down, let's say, 20 to 25% equity, right? So we're keeping those things normal. Then I should have a positive cash flow. But currently in this market, what I'm seeing is that let's say this property is $1 million, and if a person pays $1 million based upon the income, it should cash flow positively. But what I'm seeing is that people will offer $1 million, somebody else come in and offer 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, and this property that should sell at $1 million for a knowledgeable investor, you have novices coming in and they're getting approved for a loan and paying $1.8 million for a property that does not positively cash flow. And with the hopes of, well, if I sell it, I should be able to sell it for more money than what I purchased it for. So not only am I seeing the stock market increase, and let me talk about that. So you can look at a PE ratio, price earnings ratio, and I won't get too involved in that because that's a mathematical formula. But you'll say, okay, based upon the PE ratio, again, looking at income and expenses, this company's stock should be worth X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. So let's say $100, just for an example. Right. So this company's stock price should be worth $100 all day long. So if I pay $90 for it, then I got it at a discount, right? Which is good. Right. But if I pay $150 for the stock that should be normally $100, I have overpaid, and that's inflated. And so that's what I'm seeing in the stock market. I'm not seeing where these companies are generating more cash, more capital, or more income to support the acceleration or the incline of the stock price, I'm just seeing people say, well, oh, the stock market is doing good. We had 23,000. It's going to go higher, higher, higher. So you have a bunch of novices enter into the stock market, which is causing the price to go up. Mm-hmm. So there is nothing that's solid or foundational that is supporting the incline of the stock market or the prices for which real estate is selling. So where have we seen this before? If you go back and study history, we saw this also in 2006, 2007. And then things began to restrict or decline 2008, 2009, and really come to what you call crumbling 2010 era, right? That's where everything's flat out and you kind of start the cycle all over again. And I'm seeing that in our market currently. So I'm projecting, and you can quote me on this, that in 2018, we're going to see the market considerably different than what it is right now. I think we're still going to see some more incline for the fourth quarter of 2017. But in 2018, I believe we're going to see these drastic, sharp declines because the value is just not there. It's all
a bubble.
It's a bubble. It's people who are just having false expectations of what the market or the real estate will actually happen. So leads me to another thing. How
Can I stop you before we go to the next thing? Because
speculators, that's the word I was looking for. We have a bunch of speculators that's in the market, both real estate as well as the stock market.
Yes. And I see a lot of them on social media, but that's a story for another day. Yeah. When you were talking, now I've said before that I'm not an expert in finance, right? Mm-hmm. But I do believe myself to be pretty intelligent.
Yes.
So when I'm looking at, and this is a real thing, I really like the idea of real estate investment, right? When I'm looking at a property, now I wouldn't be looking at 200 units or whatever, at $1 million or whatever. I'd probably start smaller, right? So we go to my level and say, let's say I'm looking at a duplex, right?
Okay.
I'm thinking to myself, okay, in this neighborhood, the duplex could be a couple $100, right? It's a little bit run down. It's going to need some work, blah, blah, all that stuff, right? At the end of the day, I'll get it for that much. I'll be able to fix it up, and then I'll get some tenants in there. And I predict that I could have positive cash flow. However, I'm not going to just assume that. I'm going to go and see, okay, in that neighborhood, a duplex around that size, around that quality, blah, 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 is going to be renting for this much, right? How much are people paying for that? I might even go on Craigslist. I might even pretend I'm a tenant looking for a place so I could see how much it costs, right? Then I'm also going to call maybe people who fix apartments and so on and so on. How much would it cost to fix it? Blah, blah, blah. I'm also going to look into how much will my mortgage be if I take on a mortgage to pay for this. And I'm going to do these calculations, right? And then I'm going to end up with a payment that I'm going to make basically for my mortgage, right? If I'm doing it with debt. I'm going to have an idea of the things that need fixing on a regular basis after it's initially fixed, and so on and so on. And I'm going to arrive at what I can reasonably expect to pay every month, right? Get the positive cash flow or not. If I predict just from those calculations, and I could quite, not maybe accurately, but I could get a rough idea of whether it's going to be positive or negative. And I'm going to be very, very conservative in my estimation. So if it's going to cost one thing, I'm going to estimate a little bit higher. So I'm still arriving at a point where I'm kind of safe. Why would anybody go into all that process, put that much money into it without going through those basic calculations that even me, not having much knowledge or experience in the real estate arena, could basically think through?
Well, what you tend to see with the person that's novice or green is optimism, right? They're very optimistic about what can happen based upon stories or things they've read of other investors.
Or TV.
HGTV is a great one. Mm-hmm. And what a person sees 9 times out of 10 are the great exceptions. Mm-hmm. So they don't hear the horror stories, or they don't really come to grips with the normality of what usually happens. And so usually with people who are inexperienced, they go in and say, well, I'm gonna buy this property for in a neighborhood that's $200,000, and I'm gonna buy this property for $100,000, and I'm gonna put $25,000 into it. I'm 125 grand all day long. I'm gonna be able to rent it out, make money, or if you're a flipper, I'm gonna be able to sell it for $200,000 and I make 75,000. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason why that property is $100,000. That's number one. If you're in a $200,000 neighborhood, why is this property $100,000? Well, there could be some things that are not very obvious on the surface that are underlying. Mm-hmm. It could be a foundation that's crumbling. It can be you look at see an electrical panel box in the basement, which shows you circuit breakers, but behind the walls there's still knob and tube, which is very dangerous for the potential of fires. You can have a rodent infestation, so where a person coming in looking and saying that, oh, $25,000, I can get this up and running. Another person might see, well, I really have $100,000 that I got to invest into this. So therefore, if I'm gonna buy it for 100 grand, I put 100 grand or more into it, I might as well just buy a property that's already up and running turnkey at 200,000. Right. Why would I spend $200,000 on a fixer upper that's going to cost me time? So that's another aspect. So while it might take you 3 to 6 months, and that's another part where people are very optimistic. I can go in here for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks and be done at $25,000 investment for renovation.
And working my job.
Right, and working my job. They don't have the crew. They don't have experienced guys. They're paying retail for material, and they're paying retail for labor. Mm-hmm. Whereas a person that this is their business, they automatically going to save 40% cost just in labor. So they already have the crew. So their crew, they need to keep their crew working, not per job saying this is what we're going to charge. They're already on salary or already on payroll making X, Y, and Z. So you're going to save 40% there. People who do this for a living, who are not novices but an expert, they buy in bulk quantity. So instead of buying a 2x4 at $5 per 2x4, they buy it in barrels, where now their cost is $3, where someone else who's buying a 1-off or 2-off is paying $5, as an example. They buy 100 toilets at a time versus buying 1 toilet, 2 toilet as needed. So their cost is automatically going to be decreased. If they're going in getting favorable contract pricing, not only do they save buying in bulk, but now they also can save 5 to 10% because they get contract pricing, things that a person who's a novice is not going to get. Another person go in and assess, say, hey, not only am I going to dump 100 grand into a $100,000 property, but for that 3, 6, 9 months, I'm actually down. So while I got my crew working on this property, I'm not generating any income. So that's an opportunity cost. These are the things that a professional or someone who's in this space, we're calculating, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're looking at the market itself. So just because houses in this neighborhood are going for $200,000, is that really a good value? Just because the market is saying that this house is worth $200,000, have your rents or the amount of money you can collect at rent escalated at the same ratio as the price of housing has escalated? And that's usually not. So where this property could have been selling at $150,000 and say rents were just say $1,000, per unit. Just because that property now has gone up to $200,000, that rent still might only be $1,000, where you cannot get $1,200 or $1,300 because the rent have not kept pace with what the market is saying the value of the home. Right. So a true investor will go out and they will look at a 10-year spread, and they might say, okay, over 10 years, this particular neighborhood, the appreciation of value have been on an average of 3 to 4% per year, as an example. This particular year, I'm seeing in 2017, well, the appreciation is at 6%, 7%. So right there is a key red flag that there is something wrong with this market, right? Because if I see historically, averaging 3 to 4 years, and all of a sudden I see this normality of 6%, 7%, 8% in 1 year, I know that there is a bubble. That we have some speculators, we have some novices that is driving the market up that really has no true value. And at some point, it's going to constrict and it's going to come back down to reality. And those in our past who have bought properties in 2007, 2008, 2009 really lost their shirt. They overpaid for properties. And what they did, they ended up being foreclosed or trying to hold on to the property to get their money back, and it just did not happen. So, not only am I seeing that in real estate, to answer your question, I'm also seeing that same analogy being applied to the stock market.
Thank you for answering my question. And I think that it's worth noting that when you talk about expert and a person with experience, we're actually talking about you. When you talk about an investor, a person who knows and so forth. I think that's important to note. But to move on to the second part, which was actually the bulk of my question, was how does an ordinary person, insulate themselves from what you predict is going to happen, which is that this is going to crash, right? What are the key things that we can do, me and everybody watching, what can we do to insulate ourselves so that we are not the victims of this thing? We've seen what's happening, we've listened to an expert, and there's some key things that we can do to insulate ourselves.
So preparation. So what are some things that I would recommend? I would try while the market is good to say, okay, maybe in the fourth quarter, what if I'm dealing with stock? What can I sell off and take my winnings, right? So if I bought a stock at $100 and now it's at 150, instead of trying to be greedy and time the market, I say, you know what? I made $50 per share. Let me take my winnings, or let me take my gains is another. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I see your hand up.
I want to interrupt to insert something you've already taught me and us, right?
Yes.
When you go in and you buy stocks, right? You at least make how much you've put in. So what you're saying is if you've made what you've put in, at least take out what you put in, right?
Yeah. So right. So you can do one or two things. So if that stock now is at $150 and I literally took out of my pocket, when I say pocket, it could be savings or whatever. I've literally paid hardcore cash $100 for this stock, and now it's at 150. So I can do one or two things. So I can say, you know what? I'm going to take my capital, my $100 out of the market, right? So I'm going to sell it or X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to put the $100 back into my pocket, but I'm going to leave the $50 in the market. Or I could take the whole 150 out and put it back in my pocket. Now, what would I do if I'm putting it back in my pocket? Whether it's 100, if I take my capital, invest it, or we call equity, or if I take the whole entire 150, which is your equity plus gains, right? I'm going to do a couple of things. Number one, if I believe that the market is going to restrict or decline, I'm prepared for that by saying, okay, let me get rid of all extra expenses. So that country club that I don't have to belong to, that you're paying, $2,000 a month to belong to. You might say, hey, I don't want to be a golf member. I want to be a social member. I don't want to be a member at all. Going out to eat every single day. I might start to say, let me invest a little bit more into.
Can I make suggestions of everyday people?
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
A country club membership to give away.
Right. I'm gonna cover every aspect.
Okay.
Bear with me. Okay. or those outstanding credit card debts or loans, right? So I take my winnings, I pay off my car. I pay off the credit card. I pay off any loans that I might have, right? Understanding that if the market restricts, then some people might get laid off. Some people might not be working overtime anymore. So things are going to change. Inflation is going to go up. So I'm preparing myself for it. So even let's say, the low income or middle income, what can I do? What could that person do? Pay off your loans. Get rid of, I want to try to reduce how much money is going out every single month and retain more money. In a recession, cash is king. And so therefore I want a king standpoint. Also, I'm thinking ahead. So if I look at if the market declines, then at some point in time, things are going to go on a fire sale. So that stock that is really at $100, let's say that's what it's worth,
Mm-hmm.
it might appear in the recession for $80, $70. That's when I want to. That's when I want to buy. So if I look at 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, we had more millionaires emerge in 2014, 15, 16, 17 because they actually bought when things went on sale. So, I posed this question before, what would a person do if Walmart was having, a 20% off sale on everything in the store?
Well, you go buy what you need.
They go buy, right? They go on a sale. Well, my same question applies. What happens if the stock market goes on a 20%, 30% sale?
You go buy.
Buy. What's the difference? Walmart, you're buying liabilities, right? You're buying things that's not going to make you any money. You might use it and it's gone. Or if you're holding on to something in Walmart, it's declining in value. The stock market, if I'm buying in a recession or an equity, I'm buying because I know that it's going to come back to true value at some point. I'm buying an asset, something that's going to make me money. And that's the difference. And you have to look at it the same. What I believe is taking your emotions out of the equation, right? So you can never time the market. So trying to time the market is fool's gold, right? But what I can say is I might not take 100% out the market, but I might begin to move into less risky things. So if I'm into individual stocks or a day trader, I'm going out and I'm buying IBMs or X, Y, and Z, I might say, well, I want to move 60%, 70% into an index fund, right? Or some type of low risk fund, which there are others. And now saying I want to move 25% or 30% into cash. Maybe that's a money market, right? And why am I holding in the cash? For when the market does recline, right, or decline rather, or constrict, I can go out and buy things of value that I already know are valuable, right? Apple is not going anywhere. Google is not going anywhere. Some of these Fortune 500 companies that's been around for over 100 years are not going anywhere. So I want to look at what is, based upon their earnings, what is the true price of this company? And if the true price should be $100, and now I start to see it offered at $60, $50, $40, I'm buying. And I'm buying with a long-term mentality. That also applies to real estate. I'm transcending because some people invest in equity, some people invest in real estate. And even for the novice, right? So in your case, you was talking about a duplex, right? And if you go back to our example, say the duplex right now in the neighborhood is 200,000. Market declines. I start to see foreclosures. I see people who are trying to avoid foreclosures. What's the biggest a reason for divorce? Money problems, right? So now I see people starting to have arguments, possible divorces over money. These are people I want to go to. I say, hey, I can help you not go into foreclosure. Well, you paid $200,000 for it. I give you 125. Take it or leave it, right? So now I'm able to buy real estate at a discount. Now, people are always going to need a place to live. So you're still going to have people paying rent, right? And so if you buy right and you don't have outstanding debt, right? So you haven't mortgaged it 100%. You're able to lower the rent. So this person who was paying $1,000 who also have had hard times, you as an investor or the owner of this property can go in and say, hey, I understand you're having hard times, to keep you as a customer who always paid or a tenant who always paid on time. What if I lower your rent to $800 for the next 12 months?
Wow.
And if you bought the property at a good price and you're not financed 100%, say you only got 60%, 70% financing, or during now you took your money out of the market and you paid back or paid down some of these loans, right? Mm-hmm. To where now you have 30%, 40%, you can lower that rent to $800 and still positively cash flow. And I already kind of explained what cash flow is, right? Mm-hmm. So you have that ability. So these are moves that you want to make when I start to perceive that the market's going to change and I'm already in a recession. So I want to take my winnings now. I don't want to be affected because what's the worst case scenario? that stock that's now 150 that I paid $100 for, I become very, very greedy. Then overnight, that $150 stock now is worth $80.
And I'm
So now I'm like, whoa, I paid $100 to get into it. I was at 150. You didn't lose $20. You actually lost $70.
Yeah.
And so now that person don't want to sell at a loss of $80, so they try to hold it out even longer. Well, the market is declining. So now you paid 100, you was at 150, it's worth 80. Well, guess what happens next month or next week? It's worth $70. It's worth $60. And it keeps declining. That's how we saw what happened in that 2008, 2009. As an example, Ford was at $70 a share. Anybody remember the Ford stock? It got down to single digits.
Wow.
Exactly. So these are some of the things that a person, as a recap, try to eliminate expenses, see where you can cut off. Instead of going to Starbucks every day, 3 days a week, start to get in a habit, because it takes 21 days to establish a habit of saying, hey, I'm gonna cut away some of the things that are not needs that I'm spending a lot of money on. Coffee, cigarettes, going out to eat, designer clothes. In a recession, it don't care if your clothes say Gucci or Wucci, as long as you got some clothing on your back, right?
Right.
So that's number one.
I don't need a recession to
Right. Number two, start to sell off things now while people have extra money. Go into your house, have a garage sale. So while people have money, let me sell a bunch of things that I do not need. I haven't used it in a year or more. I don't need it. So let me sell that. Number three, try to see where I can get out of some investments, take my winnings, and then turn around and use those winnings to pay off debt, to at least pay down debt. And then four, be ready to purchase. When everybody's running to something, you want to run away.
Right.
When everyone's running away, that's when I want to buy.
Right.
So it's not emotional. I cannot stress that. This is logical, analytical things that you are doing. Behavior is not based upon emotions.
Right. But
Speculators utilize emotions.
From an expert.
Say that again?
You would have to have the information from an expert, because people are going to be panicking. They're going to be irrational. They're going to be driven by their emotions. I wanted to just add something to something that you said about, when it starts to really go bad, people are divorcing, they're losing their homes and things like that. I took a course, I can't remember when, maybe earlier this year or late last year, at your recommendation. So it was actually a course about buying foreclosures.
Yes.
The idea to do investments. And one of the things that really stuck with me was that you really have to look at it, because then there's the moral aspect or the ethical aspect of it. You have to look at it as that these people are in distress and you're in a position to help them. So in essence, what you're doing right now is giving us the information, the tools, and the step-by-step process of how you can actually, when everything is going bad and everybody's panicking, how you can actually be in a position to help other people. And it's a win-win, because you also gain in that, your investment is going to be a good investment, but at the same time, you're helping people who are in distress.
Absolutely. And you're helping society in that community, right? So it's a natural tendency for someone to say, well, you know what? I don't want to buy a house that somebody's losing, that family's being put out on the street.
Right.
But you got to turn that on its head. So here's a family who's struggling. And if they do not come up with the cash to sell it, the bank is going to take it over. And there's in the bank, so if they paid $200,000 for this property, the bank take it from them, right? So any money they put down on the property, any payments they made for however many years, the bank just going to take it. And then they might put it on an auction, and it might only sell for $100,000, right? The bank don't care. They take the $100,000, and guess what? Even though you paid $200,000 for it, they're going to now bill you and send you to collections for the $100,000 that's outstanding. And so if you can go in and say, you know what, I can purchase this from foreclosure, which gives you some cash, also saves your dignity, right? Then you're helping that family. How
Mhm.
are you helping the community? Well, anybody who lived in the neighborhood with foreclosures, once a property foreclosed, it becomes in disrepair, right? You have people break into the homes, the grass or the weeds grow, birds and rodents try to find their way into the house. And so now the value of the house just declines, declines, and declines, and it becomes a very eyesore for the neighborhood and community and brings the whole value down. So not only do you help that family, but you help that community and neighborhood, and essentially you help yourself. So, I do believe in capitalism, and I believe that you can make money by helping others. It doesn't have to be where you're making money at the disposal or the detriment of other people.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I thought that was just an important thing to bring up because I remembered it. I remembered having that conversation with myself, like, wow, so people are in distress and you're thinking about, but the instructor at the time did really bring it up and make it clear for me so that I became, okay, wow, yeah. So I'm actually in a position to help people as an investor.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that applies to all the other investors.
Right.
Um, uh,
As an investor, I caution people not to get caught
Please
up
keep
in
talking.
this.
I'm just plugging up so I don't run out of, so my laptop doesn't die, but please keep talking.
Oh, wow. So now I get everybody to myself. So as an investor, I do caution people not to get caught up in this no money down scheme. I call them a scheme. No equity in, where you don't have to put any money and you can take over a property, or you can get it financed. Because if you're 100% financed or near 100%, and all your numbers have to be perfect. So that means your place have to be fully rented. You have to get $1,000 from every person, or you do not cash flow positive. When the market changes, and it changes for the bad or the worse, then you also are negatively affected. But if you buy a property where, instead of financing 100% or no money down, you say, hey, I'm going to put 30% into this property, so therefore I'm only financing 70%, or you're only financing, 60%, or whatever the ratio might be, even though, you're charging market rents $1,000, which means you're making more money. If the market does decline, and you want to help out your tenants who are good tenants and lower that rent, you can lower that rent, keep your tenants, and still make money on that property. So that's one of the advantages of not being financed 100% and not living in the world where everything has to go perfect in order for you to stay afloat.
Okay. Can I take the conversation another notch lower?
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm not me personally, but just somebody listening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not an investor. I don't have properties. So this investing, taking my money there and that doesn't really apply to me. I don't really have any money in the stock market. So I can't sell my stock or whatever it is. I don't have all these things going, but I am really nervous because you're telling me that, something's going to happen. And I've seen this movie before. When that happens, people lose their jobs. I have a job. Again, not me personally. I have a job, and now I'm scared I might lose my job. So what, as a personal finance expert, can you say to me, again, so that I can insulate myself? I already have an idea.
You've been listening to my videos.
Right. That of course. And of course, because I try to be responsible myself. But
Right.
I already have an idea of what to do. And actually, now that I think about it, a lot of it does have to do with my conversations with you and the video segments that you do.
Number one, start building up a
Saving.
emergency fund. You want to have at least 8 months of your salary in an emergency fund. Emergency fund means you can get to it immediately.
Can we first state, what is it usually? What do you usually recommend?
I usually recommend 8 months.
8 months.
Now, some other people might recommend 6 months, right? So as an industry, you might see a norm, but people will say, okay, have 6 months of your expenses. In other words, the money that you would normally spend on expenses, saved in an emergency fund.
Okay.
I go beyond that. I'm going to give you the reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see either 8 months of salary net, or even better, 8 months gross.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the reason why. If you look in what's happened in our generation, so if you go back to 2008, 2009, 2010, and so forth, Unemployment, the average person was unemployed longer than 6 months. You have people who are unemployed 8 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years. So if you know that that has been the trend in the last decade or so, the likelihood is going to continue or be somewhere near that. So you want to prepare for that. Anytime that you're punching a clock, working for another employer, you are susceptible to being downsized, laid off, or let go. It's just the way it is. It's not bad or whatever. It's just the facts. So if the economy begins to decline, then those employers also feel the restrictions. They feel the noose, if you will. And so what do they do for survival? They start to cut their expenses. They start to pay off their loan, and they start to get rid of, part of getting rid of their expenses means getting rid of employees, whether that's layoff, downsize, or let go, and then either putting more responsibilities on the employees that are left, or taking some of the responsibility for themselves or their family, which can be unpaid. So how do you prepare for this? 8 months. I can't stress this enough. Start to get you an 8 month emergency fund. Emergency fund means, it doesn't mean, well, I'm hungry, so let me go get something to eat. I'm going to dig into this. Or I saw something on QVC and I want it, so I'm going to purchase it. No, emergency fund is an emergency. And you want to have it readily available. Don't put it underneath your mattress. Go get you a money market account. Not a CD, a certificate of deposit. You don't want that, because that CD locks your funds up for a certain amount of time. Even though the bank's going to try to sell you on a CD, do not get it. Because if you break that CD, then you pay penalties and fees, right? But a money market account is usually going to give you an interest rate a little higher than a regular checking account. You're going to get checks just like you would a checking account. So if you want to write a check, or you can go to the bank and get your money in hard or cash, but it's called a money market account. So those are things that you want to start doing. Number one is emergency fund. Number two, again, I recommend going to get a notebook. I like for a male, I like these small notebooks that you can get from Walmart for 97 cents. Because, and I say for males because it's easy to put it in our pockets, right? If you're a woman, you might want a bigger one because you can put it in your purse, right? Exactly. And begin to get in the habit of writing down every single thing that you spend money on. So if you go to the store and you get a 25-cent pack of Wrigley gum, write that down. Such date, this is what I bought. And at the end of the month, 30 days, begin to categorize what you're spending your money on. You can say, hey, I spent $400 in groceries. I spent $200 in fuel. I spent $300 in going out to eat, another $100 in going to the movies, so forth. And you're going to start to see where you can cut back. Start to make those cuts so that you can add that money to your emergency fund. So these are preparations. If you, and I know your story, Noma, where you and your husband are saving for a house, right? So I might say, well, I'm going to keep saving and add to that. I might not necessarily want to buy right now, but if I perceive that the market is going to decline, it's going to constrict, then there means it's going to be some sales. There's going to be some people who need to sell. If they're being downsized or let go from their company, they're trying to get rid of their expenses. Or if the company downsized and moved them to another state, they're trying to sell very quickly. Unfortunately, if they're going through a divorce, then that's another reason. Or if they're going into foreclosure or trying to avoid a foreclosure, they can do what's called a short sale. Make an agreement with the bank and get rid of their debt, but you pay a percentage of what the house is really worth or what they owe. So that's what I can recommend for individuals. Again, I can't stress. Find out what you're spending money and start to get rid of all your expenses, which includes credit cards. Pay those credit cards off, cut them up, burn them, give them to somebody else, lock them in a safe. Because when the market declines, unemployment goes up. You want to have as little expenses as possible. You don't want to already be in a shock scenario or behavior. You want to have a practice behavior to where now you've had an opportunity to get accustomed to it. So it's your normality and way of life versus I'm shocked. And what happens when people get shocked? They don't want to let go. So even though they can be downsized or let go or laid off, and the economy is declining, they want to find a way to hold on to this $500,000 home, which they can no longer afford, right? So they're taking money off their credit card to pay their mortgage, or they're going to borrow, or they're going to Quicken, those quick payday places to get money. And so they take a situation that's bad and they make it worse, because the economy doesn't turn around that fast to where you're now borrowing more money to pay existing debts, to where you believe you're going to get this influx of cash to pay everything off. It just doesn't happen like that. It's usually a slow cycle that turns around. And so those are some of the things that I can recommend for different classes.
So different levels of income.
Absolutely.
Right. And I like what you're saying, because it doesn't really just only apply to when something is coming. Mm-hmm. It really should be the way we operate.
Right.
I pat myself, being a student of yours, that these are things that I've already taken heed of, regardless of whether the economy is going to crash or not. I stopped working years ago, but every time that I think, okay, I need money, that shows me that there's something I can do away with. Because it's creating that feeling. Because the thing for me is I have to do what I need to do to not have to go back to working full time. So, and again, just to bring it down maybe to a girl level rather than a boy level, or a woman level rather than a man level, there's things like getting your hair done in hairstyles that sustain longer. You'd be amazed at how much women spend on their hair.
I'm not amazed. I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have a sister, I have a mother who like to get their hair, nails, and toes done every week.
There are women whose hair competes with other people's mortgages.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that you have to start thinking about. Things like doing your nails, where you can do them yourself. And you mentioned buying clothes. There's so many things that you really have to start to put on the table and think about. And for me, I went through that process. Do I want to be working full time and be I call it a corporate slave, or could I do something else? And I'm always doing something else. But it's created for me, at least in the last 5 years, the habit of not stretching myself too thin and really being mindful of my spending and where money's going and what's happening. And it's actually made me a much more disciplined person. And then to use the information that you gave, there's so many things that when you don't know, you can kind of say, I didn't know. But here we are, we have an expert telling us exactly what to do on every level of income. And it's not that hard to do. Well, it is hard to do. It's not easy to do. But my point is, we can't claim ignorance anymore.
Right. I mean, if you got student loans, contact the federal government and see how you can consolidate your student loans, right? Right now, we see that the interest rate has increased to maybe about 4% being the average. Well, interest rates are not going to decline anytime soon. They're going to increase as we see the Federal Reserve Chair talked about. They're warning you about it. And so, you might want to, if you got a higher interest rate, you might want to consider refinancing your home right now while the interest rate is lower, in preparation for those different things. If you got an emergency fund, and this is the importance of emergency fund. So if you have an emergency fund, again, I recommend 8 months of gross pay, then I can raise my insurance deductibles. So if you got a no deductible, $200 or $500 deductible, I can raise that deductible to be $1,000 because it saves me on the premium. And if something happened where I need to pay a deductible, I got an emergency fund. That's what it's for. I can get $1,000 out of it. So you can raise your automobile deductible. You can raise your homeowner's insurance deductible. So these are different things that you can do. Another simple thing, I'm a pet lover. I'm a dog lover. I'm not particularly fond of cats. Oh well. But I know a lot of people who go buy Iams dog food. Iams dog food is one of the most expensive dog foods you can buy. It's kind of like buying a filet mignon for humans. So change your animal's diet. Instead of buying the Iams, can you buy something of a lesser value? Or go to Costco or Sam's Club, or see, can you buy in bulk? Trust me, your dog is not going to care whether or not it's Iams or whether it's Costco brand. They just want to eat. Don't bring home so many pets. It's a thing that with pet owners, they go from 1 dog to 2 dogs to 3 dogs to 4 dogs, 4 dogs, 2 cats, guinea pigs, and so forth. these are miles and vet bills that you're going to have to be able to provide for that animal. So if I perceive, as I do, that there's going to be a restriction or decline in the market and the economy, I want to prepare for these different things. Instead of having 4 pets at home, and I know how much we love pets, I might want to donate a pet to a loved one who have lost their pet, right? So I'm doing a good service, as well as I'm starting to decrease my expenses. It's important. You got to find ways to cut back, which change is hard for most people. You know, I'm very empathetic to change because I know a lot of people it's hard to do, but you're going to have to change one way or another. So it's better if I can have a strategic way of changing that's going to benefit myself and family versus a forced change that can come a day late and a dollar short.
Right. Rather the change you choose than the change that you're forced into.
Absolutely.
Great information as usual. Just want to remind our audience where they can find your blog, where a lot of this information is. That is at drjohnbeckem.com, and it's also at personalfinanceblueprint.com, personalfinanceblueprint.com.
Another thing, passive income. A person can find other ways to have passive income in conjunction or preparation.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah. Amazon, I saw an email that came this morning about how people can sell anything on Amazon and start a business by selling on Amazon. Mm-hmm. No matter what the market does, Amazon is not going anywhere. So whether or not you find how to sell things on Amazon or eBay or things you can do from your home, find out something that you can add value or do to increase, even if it's for a temporary thing, right? There's a lot of people now who's looking for temporary Christmas help, to help whether packaging or unloading. And it's not all 9 to 5. Some of it's after hours, like UPS or FedEx or things of that nature. But you can start preparing now. You don't have to wait till it's doom and gloom. You start preparing. How can I generate some extra income to put aside? Because I know, or it might be, even if you don't buy it, I'd rather be on the safe side than on the side that's sorrowful. Saying that, hey, there's going to be some opportunities to make some purchases, or it's just survival or maintaining my standard of living where I can actually make those preparations now.
Right. And there's no such thing as too much money in your emergency fund when things really go wrong.
Right. If you're leasing a car, you might want to say, well, if there's a possibility that this might happen, I might not jump into another lease. I might say, okay, I'm gonna purchase a car, and I don't have to purchase a brand new car. I can purchase a good car. It still can have some warranty, but I'm able to afford this if the worst case scenario happens. And if it doesn't, you can always sell that car at any given time and get back in your lease. Not that I recommend people do this, but I know there are a lot of people who do utilize this avenue.
Right. Great information. Thank you so much. And one more time, just going to say you can find Dr. John Beckem's blog at personalfinanceblueprint.com, personalfinanceblueprint.com. You can also find Dr. Beckem on YouTube, which is where a lot of these videos go. And then one last place is you want to sign up for the Life After Debt Institute, which will eventually become the Personal Finance Institute. So the Life After Debt Institute is where you're going to find information like this. And of course, Life After Debt implies that you overcome your debt and you go on into, managing your finances, building wealth. So all that information is there. And that is at the Life After Debt Institute, which I'll provide the link. So again, thank you, Dr. Beckem, and thank you everybody for watching.
Have a great day.
Thank you.